Be in Mark 11. Mark 11. Going to pick up where we left off last week. If you remember, we mentioned that some of the Gospels mention the cleansing of the temple on Sunday. Jesus goes in, triumphal entry, goes to the temple, and while he's at the temple on Sunday, then he does a second cleansing. It's mentioned early in Gospel of John that he cleanses the temple early in his career. And so this is the second time that he has done this. Probably one of the reasons that they'd been keeping an eye on him for the last 3 years, besides all of the miracle working and whatever, he made himself known early on in his ministry when he went in and cleansed the temple and ran people out. He's going to do exactly the same thing. So it's kind of a signature move by this time when Jesus comes to town and goes to the temple and cleans it out. They're not extraordinarily surprised by his behavior, but they need to do something about it. They're not at all ready for this. All right, beginning in verse 12 of chapter 11. The next day, as they were leaving Bethany, Jesus was hungry. Seeing in the distance a fig tree with leaves, he went to find out if it had any fruit. When he reached it, he found nothing but leaves, because it was not the season for figs. Then he said to the tree, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." His disciples heard him say it. Okay, so this is an interesting little tidbit. It's going to have great meaning behind it, but as far as for the time being, Jesus gets mad at a tree and curses it. The fact that it had leaves gave him hope that maybe there was something going on that he couldn't see underneath the leaves, and maybe there would be some fruit that he could enjoy. But upon closer examination, it was already past bearing any fruit. And so he cursed it that no one would get fruit from it ever again. What's the parallel? You already know this, right? The tree is equal to Israel, right? Israel looks like they're alive. They look like they should be bearing fruit, but they're not. And so in this last week, as he's getting closer and closer to his crucifixion, he comes into more and more conflict with the leadership of the Jewish nation. They're a group that should be bringing forth fruit. They look like they're alive, but they're really not. Okay. Verse 15. On reaching Jerusalem, Jesus entered the temple courts and began driving out those who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those that were selling doves, and would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts. As he taught them, he said, "Is it not written, 'My house will be called a house of prayer for all the nations,' but you have made it a den of robbers." It's almost identical to John's rendition in the early part of his ministry, but something that I guess I hadn't noticed before. He was driving out those that were buying and selling, overturning the money changers' tables and the benches of those who were selling doves. I don't remember John mentioning the doves. I'll have to go back and look. But why were there doves in the temple? You think about, sheep and cattle and whatever for sacrifices. Why doves?
People are cheap.
Yeah, they're cheap. You couldn't afford the high-priced animals, then you could bring a dove. When Jesus was born and they went to the temple for Mary's purification ritual, they sacrificed doves. They just didn't have anything. They didn't have any money to buy anything large for a sacrifice. So they used doves at that point and probably purchased them in the temple courts. So this is a statement from Jesus to the leadership that this is not the kind of worship, not the kind of atmosphere that God is seeking. This should be a place of prayer. It should be a place that is set aside as something special, not a big marketplace. And they had turned it into a den of robbers, as he says. The chief priests and the teachers of the law heard this and began looking for a way to kill him, for they feared him because the whole crowd was amazed at his teaching. So here's Jesus' arrest warrant. We're going to have to do something about him. we're going to have to devise a way to get rid of him. Over in John 11, they start talking about how can we figure out how to get rid of him. What's going to be the game plan? What do they come up with?
Blasphemy.
Well, for blasphemy, but how do they get him arrested? What's the charge? The charge is blasphemy. How do they get hold of him? Through Judas, right? So what they're working on is a budget. Right? They're working on how can we find somebody that we can pay off that will lead us to this guy. He's there all the time. In fact, when they come to arrest him, he says, I was with you every day in the temple. Why didn't you just take me there? Why do you have to come to Gethsemane in the middle of the night and arrest me? I've been with you all this time. You could have done it at any point. But there were nuances that went along with this plan. So part of it was we have to find the right guy that'll sell him out. And then we have to find the right time and the right place to get all of this together. And of course, Judas ends up helping them get all of those things together. When evening came, Jesus and his disciples went out of the city. Where did they go? Back to Bethany, right? They're staying out where Mary, Martha, and Lazarus live at Bethany. So it's not a very long walk. I think it's only 2 or 3 miles from the main part of Jerusalem out of the city and across the Mount of Olives to get over there where Bethany is. And so they go back home. They go back to a place where they're comfortable. He gets to spend some time with his friends. But what kind of mindset do you think Jesus had at this point? What was it like to be Jesus on Monday night, knowing that he was going to be crucified on Friday? This has to be a heavy burden that he's carrying around. And then my next question was, where's Mary, Martha, and Lazarus? It doesn't mention them specifically in this particular place. Lazarus was with him at the triumphal entry because people were amazed at Lazarus being alive. That's one of the things that drew a crowd. John tells us about that. But Mary would always be at Jesus' feet. Every time you find Mary, she's wanting more. So if he's staying in Bethany and he's staying with these brothers and sisters, I'm sure Mary is close by. I don't doubt that Martha was cooking, getting things ready for him. She just had that. She was always in the kitchen, rattling the pots and pans. Lazarus was probably somewhere close by, enjoying Jesus' company. We saw him just a few weeks ago. John tells us about a banquet that was held, and Lazarus and Jesus were sitting next to each other at the table. Right? So they're friends. They spend time together. They enjoy one another's company. So on Monday night before you're crucified on Friday, it would be really nice to have some group of friends like this. And of course, his disciples are somewhere nearby as well. In the morning, as they went along, they saw the fig tree withered from the roots. And Peter remembered what Jesus had said. Rabbi, look, the fig tree you cursed has withered. Have faith in God, Jesus answered. Truly I tell you, if anyone says to this mountain, go throw yourself into the sea, and does not doubt in their heart, but believes that what they say will happen, it will be done for them. Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. And when you stand praying, if you hold anything against anyone, forgive them, so that your Father in heaven may forgive your sins. That's a tough passage. It's a passage that he's speaking to disciples, but even the disciples, you'd have a hard time thinking, well, if Peter had decided to tell a mountain to move into the sea, it would have moved into the sea. Did Peter get everything that he wanted, that he prayed for? We don't have any examples to the contrary of Peter asking for something and not receiving it, but that's a huge statement from Jesus. Have faith in God, and whatever you ask in prayer, if you believe that you have received it, then you'll receive it. We call it the name it, claim it, brethren, right? Just tell God what you want, and he's obligated to give it to you. I don't know what to do with this passage. Right? It could be that he's just talking to the apostles and it's just a promise for them. It could be that it's meant for all of us, but there seem to be exceptions to the rule. Because there are so many things that we ask for fervently in prayer that we don't receive. And then what do we do? Was I not faithful enough? Did I not ask in the right way? I've got a friend that when he really wants to put something before God, he fasts along with his prayer life. We try to find a way to make this work. But, we've come up with sayings like, well, God always answers prayers. He just sometimes says no. But this is a huge statement from Jesus. And like I said, I don't know exactly what to do with it. Whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours. And then he goes on to talk about forgiveness. If you've got anybody that has a problem with you or you have a problem with them, you need to forgive them, then forgive those folks. In Matthew 6, what we call the Lord's Prayer, right? Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. So we go to God in prayer, and basically the answer is, well, how are you doing with your relationships? Before I give you what you want from me, what have you given to the people around you? I'll treat you like you treat them. You get to Matthew 7, don't judge or you will be judged. Right? I'm going to give you what you give them. So I really don't know what to do with this passage. It's in the context of an amazing minor miracle, right? All that's been done is Jesus killed a tree, right? We haven't cast out demons, we haven't raised the dead. He cursed a tree and it died. And Peter is amazed by that, and Jesus says, well, that's so small. There's nothing amazing about this. You'll do bigger than this if you'll just believe. Ask God, and then you'll have what you believe. That's an interesting example. For those that couldn't hear it, he was talking about Jesus in the garden and Jesus asking for the cup to pass by him, and the answer was no. So, he knew that it had to be that way, but that's an interesting example. Anything else? Any other thoughts? It's difficult for us. We understand that God is sovereign. We understand that the last word is always His, but we still ask and we still beg at times that the Father would do for us what we want Him to do. And sometimes He does, and sometimes He doesn't. And it's just a difficult passage that Jesus, again, was talking to Peter about, a minor miracle compared to some of the things that Peter was going to be doing later on in his life. You remember when Jesus first met Nathanael? Nathanael was under the tree, and so here comes Jesus, and he says, behold, an Israelite in whom there is no guile. And Nathanael says, well, how do you know me? And he says, oh, I knew you when you were sitting under the tree. And he says, oh, man, you must be the Messiah. Jesus said, that's nothing. Just wait. You're going to see the Son of Man ascending up on high. You'll see the angels of heaven ascending and descending on the Son of Man. So there was more than one time that Jesus had these opportunities to say, what you've experienced here is not nearly what's going to happen in the future. But the statement is the statement. Ask whatever you'll ask, believe, and you will receive it. And it's difficult from our experience to read that passage and to understand exactly what Jesus had in mind. All right. So what day is it? Monday we cleansed the temple. We went back to Bethany. Now we've come back by the tree. It's Tuesday. Tuesday is a big day of questions. Now they may not have all happened on Tuesday, but they're kind of back to back to back in the accounts. So it seems like all of this happens in the same day. So starting in verse 27, we start getting different groups who band together and come and ask Jesus questions to try to trip him up, to try to find a way to find a reason to arrest him, I guess. Verse 27, they arrived again in Jerusalem, and while Jesus was walking in the temple courts, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders came to him. By what authority are you doing these things, they asked. Who gave you the authority to do this? Now, we've got yesterday, if it was Monday that he cleansed the temple, or perhaps Sunday afternoon, that's a big deal. Right? So they've had time to talk about it. They've had a meeting in the back room. Let's go talk to him. What's the question? The question is, where'd you get your authority? Who told you that you could do this? Because all of these people that are represented, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders, That's pretty much all the authority. So if we didn't tell you to do it, then who told you you could do it? And Jesus replied, let me ask you a question, and I will tell you by what authority I'm doing these things. John's baptism, was it from heaven or of human origin? You tell me. They discussed it among themselves. And they said, if we say from heaven, then he will ask, then why didn't you believe him? But if we say of human origin, they were afraid of the people, for everyone held that John really was a prophet. So they said to Jesus, we don't know. And Jesus said, neither will I tell you by what authority I'm doing these things. So he never gives them an answer. It's the most slick political move you ever saw. Everybody's moving in the same direction. The crucifixion is going to happen. Jesus knows that. The leadership is pretty sure they can figure out a way to get rid of him. But both sides are willing to banter. So they come to Jesus and they want to know, what's your authority? Where did it come from? But his answer of, what do you think about John, was the perfect answer. There was nothing. Political suicide for them to answer that question. And so they did the dance that we've been watching for the last several months. Not the question that we ask you, just whatever question you want to answer. That'll be good enough. That's what politicians have been doing for us. They just said, we're not answering that question. We don't know. Chapter 12, verse 1. So Jesus began to speak to them in parables. A man planted a vineyard. He put a wall around it, dug a pit for the winepress, and built a watchtower. Then he rented the vineyard to some farmers and moved to another place. At harvest time, he sent a servant to the tenants to collect from them some of the fruit of the vineyard. But they seized him, beat him, and sent him away empty-handed. Then he sent another servant to them. They struck this man on the head and treated him shamefully. He sent still another, and that one they killed. He sent many others. Some of them they beat, others they killed. This is the same general parable as the fig tree. You look at it, it's got fruit. It should be bearing fruit. People should be able to come in there and get what they want. It looks alive, but it's really not. It's not what you expect. So here's this group of guys who have leased out a vineyard, and everybody knows how that works. You grow the crop. When the crop comes in, then you give the owner his fair share, and you get to keep some of the profit. Everybody knows how it works. But this isn't working the way it's supposed to. He had one left to send, a son whom he loved. He sent him last of all, saying, surely they will respect my son. But the tenants said to one another, this is the heir. Come, let's kill him, and the inheritance will be ours. So they took him and they killed him and they threw him out of the vineyard. Okay? Obvious to us anyway, what Jesus is talking about. He's talking about himself. The father, the owner, has sent the one-of-a-kind son to the vineyard. He's the heir. He's the one that owns all of this anyway. But the people who have rented out the vineyard, the hirelings, will kill him and throw him out outside the vineyard. What then will the owner of the vineyard do? He will come and kill the tenants and give the vineyard to someone else. Haven't you read the scripture? The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. The Lord has done this, and it is marvelous in our eyes. The chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders looked for a way to arrest him, because they knew that he had spoken the parable against them. They were afraid of the crowd, so they left him and they went away. So 2 times in a row, Jesus gives them an opening. 2 times in a row, they chicken out because they're in a place where there's lots of people. And if they decide to arrest Jesus out in public, if they decide to say John the Baptist was a fraud out in public, they've got huge problems. So Jesus is well in control of this situation. Now, the story that he tells about the farmers, did you notice that everything that these tenants have was provided by the Father? That's the important point. Right? He built the vineyard. He dug the trench. He put up the hedge. He built a tower. Everything you would have to be successful, the Father did it. Right? The owner did it. So here's these leaders who are hirelings, and it's as if they think they own it, as if they think they were the ones that produced it. Jesus is saying to them, look, my Father put all this together. and then he let you be in charge of it, and you're not giving him his fair share. I'm the son. You're going to kill the son and throw him out of the vineyard. Then what's my father going to do to you? So they understood exactly what Jesus was talking about. This is one of several different kinds of parables that Jesus told. We don't have as many parables in Mark as we do in Luke and in Matthew, but this one is so specifically aimed at the leadership. You can't miss the point. And for a change, the leadership doesn't miss the point. They know that Jesus is talking about them, and so they're ready to do something about him. And, they're stuck. There's nothing that they can do at this point that's going to be safe for their leadership. Let's stop right there, and we'll pick up in 13 next week with the Pharisees and the Herodians. Just for the record, Pharisees and Herodians were not best friends. So when you see that the Pharisees and the Herodians came together to come to Jesus, you know that they're really starting to have to form coalitions among themselves to figure out who can get to Jesus and stop him from what he's obviously doing, which is, drawing huge crowds. And they had a parade for him, calling him the Messiah. They have to do something and do it fast. And they're getting more and more desperate